content. We need to categorize documents.
So
users in one site collection can search maybe data by some categories from another site collection in your organization. I've been thinking about taxonomy, how to categorize data, not how to create.
Right. So kind of more the information architecture side of it, where you're kind of saying like the metadata that supports it, the content types and whatnot.
Yeah.
As a part of even your site taxonomy, those things obviously. For instance, one of the projects I'm working on now deals with records management across an organization of about 40,000. Because they have so much data, and because there are so many different content types, we can't store them all in one record center because, from like a backup recovery perspective, it becomes painful. So splitting it out into multiple record centers and then being able to search across those record centers with those content types in each one, we do have that. And that's planned based on what kind of content types they actually have. That would be more kind of the information architecture as opposed to the logic architecture and site collection taxonomy. But that is definitely a consideration you take into play while you're building that out. If you did have content types that you needed to reuse, you'd probably create one site collection and then back it up and restore it, or use that as a template, so that you could then do that searching across. But it's, difficult problem. Especially for large organizations where there's tons of data. It's almost to the point where, at least for me, as much as I love SharePoint, start to look at other products that integrate back in to be able to actually do some of that more powerful content-related management. And then again, what you might have taxonomy-wise, obviously, basically this is separated out by regions, so you've got different groups coming in, utilizing different parts of SharePoint. Main application kind of has the core functionality that you'd expect from an organization, whereas all the different web applications segregated across the country would have specific buckets specific to them. So if you did have an IT group that was specified for all those, you'd have that at each one, just so it was more localized, more compartmentalized for that user group. But again, it goes back to the context of what you're actually working with. Then from a hardware perspective, if you were looking at a centralized farm, you'd probably end up with something more like this, where you have ISA kind of publishing things out and allowing people in through proxy. Several front ends, maybe multiple indexes. You probably have an extra web front end out there just for search to make things a little easier. You probably have antivirus to scan things to make sure that Eric wasn't putting corrupted documents in there. And you probably have multiple SQL Server nodes.
How often do you run into an architecture this large? You personally, from the government side?
On the government side, I see stuff like this all the time because they're trying to consolidate everything down to larger, centralized instances. Just realizing, hey, if we have 30 of these, it costs us this. Where if we've got 2 of these distributed across the country, it costs us this, management-wise, manpower-wise, and whatnot. So typically, I end up seeing kind of the more large systems, which does make kind of information architecture more difficult to work with, whereas if we're dealing with smaller organizations, typically it's easier to figure out exactly what are those reusable content types and metadata that will flow across nicely.
So the traditional large SharePoint farm is kind of a medium to small farm for what you normally see?
Maybe, yeah.
Like the ones they give examples of, like,
right.
3 or 4 SQL servers with 2 application servers and 3 web front ends, which is considered kind of a large, but I mean this is quite large.
I mean, pretty much, yeah. Like you said, anything that have a couple web servers and a SQL backend, and an index server and a query search server, Microsoft considers large. It goes back to content management and planning. And if you actually have things mapped out as to exactly what the information flow is, you're probably not going to freak out when you see something like this. You'll be like, oh, okay. So we got that map of that, and that data flows across that wire, and we know exactly what ticket or token it's using authentication-wise for a user around. Conclusion number one, realize we're running over on time. A good SharePoint implementation, we're going to have to look at it individually. Cookie cutter would be nice, but it's a pretty fluid product. It's very viral in nature, so you end up really having to plan for your organization. If you want to do kind of like one-in-one software does, what BPOS does for Microsoft, where you're kind of just delivering, here's a site collection, enjoy it, do what you want to it. Obviously, that method is pretty easy to serve up, whereas if you're actually trying to go and build something to fill a need, you probably are going to have to do a bit more for that. Again, so requirements are going to drive whatever your taxonomy and logical architecture are. All that's going to drive what your hardware requirements look like. Start off small for your system farm. One of the nice things about SharePoint F7 is that it does scale out nicely. You can move different roles around. As Eric mentioned before we even started this evening, crawl, walk, run. Organizations try to run first, probably trip and break a leg, and have to amend themselves, and it never looks good for the IT group to take that fall. Third conclusion, not to tell you guys, but what you start off with on day one, probably not going to look the same a while down the road. So prepare to be flexible. And then last but not least, user adoption is going to cause your environment to change. If you suddenly do allow users to do a lot of document collaboration, you're probably going to have to start looking at expanding your storage systems and maybe re-changing the taxonomy. Going through a taxonomy migration, very painful event if you've ever been through it, but your redirects of links and helping users define where their data now lives in a new taxonomy and architecture, something you have to plan for. But adoption is good, right? We want people to use our products that we as an IT staff can develop and find value in. Otherwise, we're probably not doing our job as efficiently as we could or effectively. So, adapt to the context as it changes and rock and roll. As far as how you can find me, Twitter, but then not Twittering as much as Eric does. A lot of just different things going on right now, work-wise, that kind of kept me away from my BlackBerry or anything else. You can find me on Google Talk at 3 in the morning sometimes. Feel free to add me. I won't be like, who is this person? You can find me on live.com as well. Email is always available. But yeah.